Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jutapada Kamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Shri Chaitanya Prasadena Tadrupasya Vinirnayam Balopi Kurute Shastram Drisva Vrajavila Snihi Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Nama Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Ganesha Sharada Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Welcome back to a text that we were going through, I think, about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. Uh, I think we're just this Gorpernium, I believe we're just passing the 2 year mark, quite possibly, of how long I've been giving classes on Discord, which is incredible, wild thing to contemplate. And this is a part of our class that as we kind of delved into more special topics, as we've been wanting to thank you thank you very much. As I did that whole series on Ramakrishna and his Vaishnavism, which was going to be just 3 lectures, but I think it's spanned out to being like eight to 10 lectures. We've done. Hold on, I'm just like admitting people into the waiting room. We've covered a lot of ground, and especially in the interest of getting through the Bhagavad Gita and the preliminary context of Bhagavatam, I've kind of let this aspect of the teaching that I was going to integrate from the beginning kind of fall by the wayside, and that is digging into these what we can call kind of bhakti tantra texts, bhakti advice texts, um, instructions for practical devotional life. One of the most famous of these texts, I think probably the text of the how to bhakti, let's say, is the Narada Bhakti Sutra, which Nish talks about in his Friday classes, giving kind of a non-dual bhakti reading of the Narada Bhakti Sutra. One of a great example of this is the excuse me, is the Madhurya Kadambini by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that takes these different stages of devotional service, Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, Uttama Adhikari, that we talked about kind of 2 classes ago in this series, way last year when I was talking about it. And excuse me, something in my throat today. And Madhurya Kadambini goes through these stages in depth and talks about the specific pitfalls and the anarthas, these unwanted qualities that come up that we uproot as part of our progress in devotional service. I intend to get to that text eventually, but I think one of the core texts that I should elucidate first is this Nectar of Instruction. Upadesha Amrita by Rupa Goswami, one of Chaitanya's intimate disciples. And I want to kind of sort of get us back into the groove of this text, I'm going to start by providing a little bit of review. We left off at verse 5, so I'm going to kind of go over the content of each of these verses. These verses are kind of like sutras, a lot of information and a lot of implications packed into one verse. These verses are not sutras themselves. They're very lengthy, proper poetic Sanskrit verses. A sutra is just not even a complete sentence. Those of you who have read Bhakti Sutras or Patanjali Yoga Sutras. But we can call these Rupa Goswami's sutras on bhakti. And so in the sort of 7 or 8 sessions that we did last time, these are the texts that we are exploring. And it opens with a very famous verse. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So the first principle of bhakti, according to Rupa Goswami, is this renunciation, tolerance of material desires. To truly master one's material desire is to become the guru of everyone in the world, right? Because we are all in this world being thrust this way and that way by our desires. To control our senses, we say, oh, we have to control the senses. But controlling the senses is one of the fruits of the total bhakti experience. And so if we cannot get rid of them, at least right away, we should be able to tolerate them. And it elaborates on this more in text 2. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities: eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required, over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters, practicing the spiritual rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically, associating with worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, and being greedy for mundane achievements. These are things that set us back on the path. And some of these may seem a little culty, right? Prabhupada's language is a little culty, but the Sanskrit is much simpler and much more, you know, there are there are many more there are the Sanskrit is much more compact than all of this. Even Prabhupada's translations are sort of an elaboration, let's say. But we can see immediately the applications of these things. How many of us have over endeavored for mundane things that are difficult to obtain? And we already talked, in Bhakti Sutra talks a lot about this, the danger of evil company, the danger of being associated with people who bring us down. I'm not saying, oh, you should like reject all of your quote unquote non-spiritual family and friends. Just like what makes a spiritual person is not, are they chanting Hare Krishna? Do they have a holistic view of their own relationship with you? Do they care about you in a way that they're willing to meet you where you're at, or are you able to meet each other in the middle? What is the reciprocity in this relationship, right? What is the center of this relationship? Are we in this relationship because we genuinely love each other, or are we exploiting each other, right? So what it means to be spiritual, I think when it says you should only have spiritual association, is the key here. Just briefly running over some of the points um, that we discussed in the earlier classes. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of devotional service. There's being enthusiastic, endeavoring with confidence, being patient, acting according to the regulative principles such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna. We went through the 9 processes of bhakti in one of these classes. Abandoning association of non-devotees and following in the footsteps of previous acharyas. Asatsangatya, that I believe this is the verse that says asangatyagats, renouncing association that is not satsang, that is not truth. False association, association that is rooted in falsehood, is something that is to be avoided. Offering gifts in offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasad and offering prasad are the six symptoms of love shared by one devotee to another. This is one of my favorite verses. I love this verse so much. So many of these bhakti texts are about how we should be to each other in the devotional community, being charitable, being trustworthy, being able to both reveal one's mind in confidence and to receive someone in confidence, accepting mercy, offering mercy. Prasad just doesn't just mean food. Prasad means the grace of the Lord, and we are meant to be agents of grace in each other's lives. We accept this is what this call is. I hope, I can deliver some of the mercy of this text to you all, and I am getting so much mercy by you all coming and giving me the opportunity to expound upon it and to contemplate it for myself. Because if there's anything that keeps me reading, like, right, that keeps me engaged in the text, it's getting to talk about it with other people. So I'm eternally grateful for the mercy you have extended to me by coming to this class and tolerating my antics. But this is the verse we left off on, this text 5. One should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name of Lord Krishna. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation and is engaged in worshiping the deity. One should associate and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. Yes, it's good to stay focused on the true subject matters of our lives. Keep the main thing, as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous and in many other places. Keep the main thing. So we talked about these different categories of devotees. So one should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name of Lord Krishna. So what is the qualification of someone to be a devotee? Krishna iti yasya giritam manasa adriyeta. You honor a person who has uttered in speech the holy name with one's mind. I find this very, very interesting because we 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 are very hesitant to call ourselves devotees, and it's rightfully so. We should not presume ourselves as, oh, I'm a devotee of Kali. What does it mean to be a devotee of Kali? It means to be absorbed in the seva of Kali, in the remembrance of Kali 24/7. And how many of us can say that we are, I mean, some of us, if we take that perspective, we can say we're always in remembrance of Kali, but we're not talking about Mahamaya aspect, right? We are aware of Mahamaya all the time, uh, but we are absorbed in Mahamaya all the time. But we want to know Vidyamaya, Yogamaya, the transcendent aspects of the Divine Mother that resides even in the infinite aspect of the Divine Mother, but the non-delusive, let's say, aspect of God. This is what we this is what we wish to cultivate, that sort of awareness. And so we cannot say that we are full devotees, but we say, oh, we can say Of course, casually, yes, we are all devotees. It's ridiculous to say that we're not. But when we think of ourselves, we shouldn't think, "Oh, I'm a devotee." We should say, "Oh, I'm aspiring to be a devotee. I'm practicing devotion or trying to practice devotion." This is considered the proper way, kind of in devotional culture, to think of oneself. But in the Chaitanya sects, Chaitanya himself, in his mood, he said something very interesting. When Srila Satyaraj Khan, a great devotee of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, asked the Lord how a Vaishnava could be recognized, the Lord replied, Prabhu kahe yandra muke shunye eri bara, Krishna nama se puja shrestha shakabhara. If one hears a person say even once the word Krishna, that person should be accepted as the best man out of the common group. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, Ateva yanra mukhe eka Krishna nama, setai Vaishnava kariha tanhara samana. One who is interested in chanting the holy name of Krishna or who by practice likes to chant Krishna's name should be accepted as a Vaishnava and offered respects as such, at least within one's mind. Prabhupada continues, one of our friends, a famous English musician, this is most likely referring to Shriman George Harrison, a great friend of the movement at the time. Even in his records, he has several times mentioned the holy name of Krishna. At his home, he offers respects to the pictures of Krishna and also the preachers of Krishna consciousness. In all regards, he has a very high estimation for Krishna's name and Krishna's activities, and therefore we offer him respects to him without reservation. For we are actually seeing that this gentleman is advancing gradually in Krishna consciousness. Such a person should always be shown respect. The conclusion is that anyone who is trying to advance in Krishna consciousness by regularly chanting the holy name should always be respected by Vaishnavas. On the other hand, we have witnessed that some of our contemporaries who are supposed to be great preachers have gradually fallen in the material conception of life because they have failed to chant the holy name of the Lord. So the chanting itself is what keeps us in the game. It's not how much we feel it. It's not how much we understand it. It's not even necessarily how sincere we are. Remember, Ajamil, right, the famous story in the Bhagavatam, had lived, he did not have much awareness of the holy name. We'll get to his story in a minute as I go through these verses. So we so the verse is getting at itself is establishing this hierarchy. Okay, so anyone who chants the name of Lord Krishna, that's a devotee, and you shall offer humble obeisances to the devotee. You should mentally honor them. You should welcome them into the temple. You should consider them as your brother, your sister, your sibling. Sometimes we, as spiritualists who are on a kind of more traditional path, can kind of sneer at the devotion of those who are, you know, less advanced, perhaps, although that presumes that we have a degree of advancement, and which we do. We all have a degree of advancement. But I'm saying, like there are these kirtans that I go to sometimes at yoga studios and other kind of non-traditional spaces, and I can be a little uncomfortable. It's, I love wooey stuff. Those of you who don't know me, I love the like women's circles and cacao and ecstatic dance especially. I love going. We have a really nice dance community here in Southeast Michigan. But I think like and that's fine on its own. But for me, I think the moment that kirtan enters the space, I kind of get uncomfortable because it's not what I'm used to, and it's not always presented in a way that I would consider paka or proper. And they may be committing offenses to the holy name, of course. But of course, I commit offenses to the holy name. We all commit offenses to the holy name. And we'll talk a little bit about more what that is in a minute, because I know we're kind of getting our feet back into the water here in this text. But they are to be considered a Vaishnava. They are chanting Maha Mantra. They are trying to feel a spiritual connection. And also, it helps us honor ourselves. We look back on, maybe some of our interactions with spiritual leaders. Like, I remember the first times I talked to a Swami, right? I totally fumbled it. Like, right? I didn't know how to interact with a Swami. We don't know those things at the beginning of the formalities, the culture. I have a story. I have a, you know, just to have a digression, a story that my temple president likes to tell is that when he was a new bhakta in the temple, he would, he was living at the Detroit temple, the Hare Krishna temple, and people would come for Sunday feast, and people who weren't devotees would come for Sunday feast. And there was a Chinese lady who had shoes on inside the temple, these kind of like orthopedic, like light shoes. And he immediately goes up to her because you're not supposed to have your shoes on in the temple. There's a very strict custom. Leave your shoes at the door. Sometimes you even have to wash your feet before you go into the temple. Shoes contain the impurities of the outside, the the germs, right? How many germs are on your shoes? It baffles me that there are people who have shoes on houses. That is something I can never like as a person who maybe it's just being Asian, right? I'm Japanese by ancestry. So this is a usual kind of Asian custom, right? And so if I saw someone in the temple with shoes on, I would kind of freak out. Like. But so Deva, I shouldn't say his name, but my temple president, he tells this story very openly, right? He goes up to the person and is like, "Oh, you have to put your shoes away. Your shoes are over there. Let me take you over there." And she kind of like pulls back from him, and she says in a very heavy kind of accent, you can tell that she's English is not her first language, "I have condition." She has some sort of like physiological condition that it's hard for her to be barefoot on these like hard marble floors, and so she's wearing shoes. And he never saw her at the temple again. And he says, and he's told us, in classes, like that was a moment where I kind of blew it. And so, like, even if we think that, like, oh, we assume that we know what's best for someone coming, to spiritual life, people on Zoom ask me questions all the time, and I have to kind of remember, and and I remind people, it's like I am not, an authority, right, on your spiritual. I can help, I can listen, I can offer what I have, but ultimately, what I have is only what I have. So I think honoring means like a full recognition of what this person has. Not okay, I recognize what you have, but I can make it better. I can like tell you to chant, this mantra or do this puja for those that are newer. You can rest assured that Krishna has got them and Krishna is giving this person what they can handle. So we shouldn't impose ourselves upon people who are chanting the holy name in a way that maybe we don't necessarily agree with, because this could lead to friction and it can lead to someone, it could taint their experience of the holy name in a way. When your experience gets tainted when someone comes to you and nitpicks at you for doing it right or wrong, right? One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation diksha. So this is they are worthy to be pranamed to. So like when we go out chanting Hare Krishna on the street, the college kids are dancing chanting Hare Krishna. We don't get on our feet, get on our knees like before them. There's senior Vaishnava. They would get freaked out, right? That would not be mentally honoring them. But the pranams are to be given to our fellow brothers and sisters. We call in the bhakti culture, oftentimes we call people Prabhu. Prabhu means master, Mahaprabhu. Prabhupada, all of these, the great master, in the Prabhupada, one who follows in the footsteps of the master. And this is meant to be our default attitude towards people. It's not what can I get out of you, but how can I serve you? Service is the primary mentality here. And so this act of, like when someone speaks at the temple, at the Hare Krishna temple, that is. It could be someone I've known for years, right? Someone who, I have, before they got initiation, someone who I did dabs with in the back of the restaurant that they worked at, like, and now they're giving class. We offer respects, even though like we may have a formal, informal relationship with them. This respect is very powerful, especially if it's coming from someone that you know, because it shows I have faith in you. And I appreciate you. And so we show that proper appreciation when when someone is giving us a pravachan. I'm not asking you all to bow to me. Like, please don't bow to me. But that culture, the culture of the touching of the feet it can be used to kind of put people down. It can be used as a very oppressive thing. This the idea of like that someone's wearing a sacred thread, they're automatically worthy to you to go up and touch their feet. That's a very unpalatable idea for some people. But I think the idea works in the context of a devotional community where you're seeing the efforts that they are putting forth towards the community, and your efforts are plugging in with their efforts. I remember whenever we have a festival, after the big kirtan that happens, the big arti that happens, there's always acknowledgments. This person cooked the feast. This person was responsible for the decorations. This person dressed the deities. This person arranged for so and so Swami to be here. It bhakti takes a village. It's not something that is generally done on our own. Even the sadhus who go off in a cave and chant the holy name forever, they come back for Kumbh Mela or for Kartik Mas or for these periods where sadhus can come together and do bhajan together. So seeing each other's contributions and reciprocating with their contributions, if we live in spiritual community, this is a way to interpret this humbling of offering of humble obeisances. And we serve the devotees who are engaged 24/7 in chanting Hare Krishna, who is an Uttama Adhikari. In this verse, Sri Rupa Goswami advises the devotee to be intelligent enough to distinguish between Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. The devotee should also know his own position and should not try to imitate a devotee situated on a higher platform. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given some practical hints to the effect of that an Uttama Adhikari Vaishnava can be recognized by his ability to convert many souls to Vaishnavism. One should not become a spiritual master until he has attained the platform of Uttama Adhikari. Uttama Adhikari is like being a master. It is the qualification that one undergoes, and that one must attain before holding that kind of spiritual authority in one's life, the authority of a guru. That's not something you play with. And we talked about this, I won't go into it because we had a whole class recently on Guru Tattva and what it means that what surrender to the guru means in a healthy and modern context. But I would say, and I think thinkers like Swami Padmanabha and more progressive Vaishnava thinkers would say that Uttama Adhikari, it doesn't mean perfect, flawless human being. It means a person who is committed and sincere and whose practice is strong enough that they can also take responsibility for the practices of other people. I think that it is And there are external signs that you can see when a person realizes himself to be an eternal servitor of Krishna, he loses interest in everything but Krishna's service. Always thinking of Krishna, devising a means by which to spread the holy name of Krishna, he understands that his only business is spreading Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. Such a person is to be recognized as an Uttama Adhikari. So, dedication is one of the main factors in whether or not someone is an Uttama Adhikari. But this doesn't mean flawless necessarily. And it doesn't mean that if a spiritual master is on a certain level, maybe a Madhyama Adhikari, maybe a Kanishta Adhikari, it doesn't mean that they are giving someone nothing. We get gurus often that serve a particular need at a particular time. And if we have a falling out, or if that guru falls down, or what things happen all the time. That's not to, if anyone has a guru, that's not to like like paint a grim picture of it. But their status as an Uttama Adhikari is not something that they themselves proclaim. It is something that we recognize in them. I have taken initiation under a spiritual master because I have recognized something in him. But that doesn't mean that if someone else comes to my guru that they're going to automatically want to take them as their spiritual master. They may see something in someone else, and that's okay. These relationships are meant to be personal. It's not like, oh, this person's on a certain level, everyone has to grovel before them. No one has to grovel before anyone. But if we accept that this state of perfection or pursuance of perfection is attainable in the first place, then what engaging properly as Vaishnavas means is we recognize the symptoms of that perfection in others. And so, hold on. Okay. The chanting of the holy names of Krishna is so sublime that if one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra offenselessly, carefully avoiding the 10 offenses, he can certainly be gradually elevated to the point of understanding that there is no difference between the holy name of the Lord and the Lord himself. One who has reached such an understanding should be very much respected by neophytes devotees. One should know for certain that without chanting of the holy name of the Lord offenselessly, one cannot be a proper candidate for advancement in Krishna consciousness. It is said, Yahara komala shraddha se kanishta jana krame krame tenho bhaktaha ibe uttama. One whose faith is soft and pliable is called a neophyte, but by gradually following the process, he will rise to the platform of Uttama Dikari, first class devotee. So I think the primary factor is if the spiritual master's conviction is such that other people's convictions can take shelter of theirs. We find our conviction wavering over and over again. But a person who takes the practice, takes it seriously, and meaningfully integrates the practice into their life, that is something that we can learn from and take from. And so this is how we gauge whether or not a person is worthy to learn from or not. But these 10 offenses, the main topic of this class, even though I've spent most of the class talking about, related topics, our last class was going through them kind of one by one in depth. And I'll read, like I did the first time, the first five. I believe we were at five, about halfway through. So the first offense to the holy name that we need to be avoid. So these are obstacles to be overcome in chanting. It's not like God is offended, and so we are so unholy, and so we can't chant his holy names. The verse that follows this section in the Padma Purana. This is a section, not the section, but a section of scripture that has been emphasized by the Gaudiya Acharyas, talking about the anartas, the unwanted things that are transcended when we practice japa, when we practice kirtan, when we practice chanting. So the first one is to blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives to chanting the holy name of the Lord. The holy name, which is identical with Krishna, will never tolerate such blasphemous activities. To consider the names of Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be on an equal level with the holy name of Lord Vishnu. We have delved into the interpretation of that verse, and we have concluded also that it very well may mean the exact opposite of this. If one sees a difference, Brahma is not mentioned, but the name of Lord Shiva is. So I think this verse, last time we analyzed this verse to mean very specifically considering a difference between the names of Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva, saying that my name of God is better than your name of God. That is an offense. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master or to engage with him on the material platform, to view him in a selfish um, or duplicitous approach a spiritual master in a kind of duplicitous fashion, or to consider him an ordinary person, to consider him on to have a material conception of him or her. To blaspheme the Vedic literatures is something. To do violence to the scriptures, either by neglecting their instructions or by taking them literally, taking them much too literally, is something we also discussed. So we have artavadaha, which is to give an interpretation. And this is a puzzling one. This is one that, like we have interpretations of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Prabhupada gave his whole purport to the Mahamantra. We, in our Namamrita class, we had several esoteric and exoteric purports of the Mahamantra that we gave. But this is meant to be a philosophical statement on the transcendental nature of the holy name. That to think that, oh, I know what this means, what the word Krishna means, to say that it is in some way finite and that there is an end that can be reached to it. Like I've done chanting. I can move on to something else. In the early stages of spiritual practice, what are we doing? We're chanting. In the late stages of spiritual practice, what are we doing? Also chanting. But it is a deeper degree of absorption in the name. We will never get anywhere in the name if we apply our finite conceptions to it. And this is something that has to be broken in order to advance. You can't have like a grasping mentality when we are chanting japa. Japa is a practice of offering, japa is a practice of surrender. And so I would say giving an interpretation means trying to pin down the holy name. That it means this thing or that thing, or it means something and not another thing. Something to think about. To consider Harinam Nikalpanam, to consider the glories of the holy name of the Lord as an imagination. We don't get anywhere chanting the holy name if we don't take it seriously. If we I'll present this in conjunction with the next offense because I think they play off each other in a really interesting way. Nam no balad yasyahi papa buddhir navidyate tasya yamer hi shuddhihi. To commit papa, to commit sin on the balad, on the strength of chanting the holy name. The translator says to think that the Hare Krishna mantra can counteract all sinful reactions, and one may therefore go on with his sinful reactions, and at the same time chant the Hare Krishna mantra to neutralize them as a great offense to the lotus feet of the Harinam. So this is, oh, I am going to continue living a sinful life, continue exploiting people, continue being um hypocritical and still be chanting the holy name. This is the I can, do whatever I want during the week as long as I go to confession on Sunday. This is what disgusts us, like, right, with most religion. Is that most of us, I'm sure many of us have been in a religious community where we've been prompted to leave because it's like, you guys aren't, we look at the church, what the church is doing. It's like, you guys aren't taking care of the poor. You guys aren't loving people unconditionally. You guys are not loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you. And yet you say, it's like oh, I'm covered by grace, right? I don't have to do anything. Therefore, I'll just go on chanting, right? So, and yet the previous verse has also said to consider the glories of the holy name, including their glories to remove sins, to be an illusion is also an offense. So, on the equal side of the coin, oh, I'm just going to keep chanting and so I can get away with doing things, with treating other people in my life badly. Or if we've done something bad, then saying to ourselves, oh, I'm so horrible, I'm so awful, I'm so fallen, I could chant 100 mantras and then it would never free me. We get that kind of unholy, the phony unholy, as Ram Dass says. This attitude, oh, I am so fallen, even this holy name cannot save me. That's bogus. And I think a great emphasis is placed on this this seventh offense and not enough on its relation to the sixth offense. Because it's one thing to be attached. We can say, I'm chanting the holy name and I'm attached to all of these other things, sex, alcohol, like whatever it is we're doing that we think we shouldn't be doing. One of our temple president told me of a young man he was counseling in Krishna consciousness and says, "Man, I have a joint in one hand and the Bhagavad Gita in the other, right, or in the Japamala in the other, right? That's so many of us, right? It's certainly been myself at various points in time, if not now, like right. Um, but I don't want to reveal too much about my personal life. But at the same time, but like that's not being duplicitous. In a way, one could argue that like, oh, that's being hypocritical, that's being, but you are looking at yourself. I think a more salient example of this verse is someone who has a very high spiritual position, who is the head of a temple, who is a teacher, who is someone who is a religious person, and yet is using that position in order to cut moral corners with themselves and the way that they treat other people. Clergy abuse is namaparad. Taking advantage of people, psychological religious abuse in the name of God, in the name of Jesus, on the strength of invoking the name of God. This is another way that we can this is another way that we can be offensive to the holy name. So I think like with we need to be careful. Like, yes, part of it is our lives are fragmented. We are chanting these holy names and our lives aren't kind of catching up to, if we really recognize what these names were, we would leave all of our vices behind. But we're still here in the same time. And does that mean we stop chanting until we can be offenseless? That's something I'll get to in a minute. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra to be one of the auspicious ritualistic mantras mentioned in the Vedas. Dharma Vrata, Tyaga Hutadi, Agni Huta Hutadi, Sarva Shubha Kriya Samyam Api Pramada. To consider this chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra like Agnihotra Yagyas, vows of penance and austerities. This is a work. I am building up my merit so I can go to heaven. I'm building up my merit so I can get liberation. This is not we should take the holy name in a humble matter. Trinadapi sunichena. We should be divested. All of these things, Brother Manchari Nas Babaji, as like we said in the last class, in a couple classes ago, Gyanis and yogis and mimamsans, they can all do something with their works. They can all do some, they can all build a tower of spiritual practice and enlightenment and say, I have attained this. This is mine. But bhaktas, we are purely reliant on kripa. We are purely reliant on grace. And so if we see the Mahamantra, our chanting of the Mahamantra, as anything other than the reign of the grace of God entering down into our lives, then we have lost the plot. If we get attached to the fruits of our chanting. As Krishna advises Arjuna, do not be attached to the fruits of your acts. And I think this one is, I think, one of the most relevant to us, especially those who are trying or are budding kind of spiritualists here. Ashraddhadhan vimukepya shrinvati Yaschopadeshaha Shivanam aparadaha. You see that Shiva, it's not included in the translation, but there are some people, who have interpreted this passage and including some Vaishnava scholars to say that this is originally a passage about abusing the names of Lord Shiva. We're about to have Shivaratri, right? So go figure when it comes to the Vaishnava trend of exclusionism and exclusivity. But this is to someone who is ashraddha, who does not have faith, vimukhe, who is reluctant, ashrinvati, who does not want to hear. This is often said as you should not preach the holy name to an atheist. And we'd say like this seems counterintuitive to Prabhupada's vision. That's how Prabhupada translates it. But it takes on a more nuanced meaning that I wish that the Hare Krishna movement on the whole would catch on to, is that it actually means you should not preach to someone who is unwilling to hear. I cannot tell you how many times that I have been out with the Hare Krishnas chanting mantras, and well-meaning devotees will go up to people in hijabs and distribute books to try to distribute books to them when they are not interested. That is not their path. Their path doesn't has many contradictions to our path, even though we acknowledge it. Islam is a legitimate religion that leads to salvation. As Ramakrishna Bhaktas, we believe this. As Prabhupada also believed this. Muslims are Vaishnavas, he would say. But the thing is, they're not going to be interested in our Krishna consciousness. They have their own thing going. They have their own system, their own rules, their own perspective. And while we've talked about many times on this show, Hinduism and Islam, they meet and they interact and magic happens, right? When that happens. But it, but it only happens because either side was not coming at each other with a kind of conversion mentality. And I don't want to paint all of these interactions as bad, because certainly there have been, we used to do in my own community, we used to do these interfaith panels where people would come and talk about their different, and one of them was on the holy name of the Lord. And so I think this concept of God's name being paramount in sadhana is very, very salient, I think, across all of the world's religions. But when our perspective is one amongst many others that we are surrounded by, it can be easy to kind of want to assert ourselves. It can be easy to have egos pop up when we see people who may seem more pious or more, what they're getting from their religion. And because we are insecure in our own practice, that means that we see that as a threat. I had a great sadhu tell me, French monk who came to my community, who's the spiritual teacher of a dear friend from college who joined the Hare Krishnas. And he told me, and he's kind of an independent Swami. He's a Prabhupada disciple, he was in ISKCON for a while and kind of went and formed his own program. And he told me that when someone is fanatical, it only means that they are insecure in their own experience. And so when someone is, when we encounter the preacher, right, who's on the streets saying turn or burn, you're going to go to hell, we can acknowledge that his fervor is coming, I think, somewhere down from a place of insecurity. Whether that insecurity is fostered by his own experience or by his faulty beliefs, right? He's insecure because this belief has been planted in him that God is going to reject some people totally for eternity, right? It may not be fault that they don't want to hear. They're traumatized because of religion. And it's not their fault that they don't want to practice Krishna consciousness. We should have, no quarrel when someone in our circle decides, okay, this path is not for me, even though it may be hard for us. And I have experienced that when someone has left the faith for X and Y reasons, I can be very hurt and very like conscious about, the sort of things that are more complicated in the faith, and that can lead to kind of black and white thinking. I think that's also another thing that is an aspect of this verse that is under recognized, is that the friction that comes up when you come up against someone that you really disagree with can be damaging for both people. It can damage relationships, it can damage friendships, but it can also damage our own perspective. Rupa Goswami himself said that you should never tell people your mantra, your guru, or your Ishtadevata. Mantra is the one we know about. There are some communities where it's like everyone's chanting the same mantra, everyone's chanting Hare Krishna, but most of the time you have a personal mantra that you have. Or your Ishtadevata, right? They may know your Ishtadeva, you're a devotee of Kali. But what specific relationship you have with Kali remains in the core of your heart and communicated amongst different friends. To share testimony where it is not welcome necessarily can be a very damaging thing, not only for other people, but for us, because we can internalize other people's conceptions of what we believe, their misperceptions of what we believe also. So it's not only for their sake and being a harmonious citizen, it is for our sake and protecting our boundaries, right? Rupa Goswami says, or Padma Purana says rather, protect your boundaries. Shrutipi nama mahatmye ya priti rahito naraha aham mamadi paramo nam nisopyaparadakrit. If one has heard the glories of the transcendental holy name of the Lord, but nevertheless continues in a materialistic concept of life, thinking, I am this body, everything belongs to me, everything to belong to this body is mine, aham mameti, aham mamadi, and does not show respect and love for the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, this is an offense. Api pramadaha. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. This is a big one. This is a big one. So many times I'm just chanting and chanting and chanting with my japa bag, and what I'm thinking about is what am I going to get for lunch? What am I going to have? When am I going to get time to do laundry? What time am I going over to my partner's house? Like all of these things. And that often, so much of our chanting would be better, I think, if we just practice time management. There's the one of the temples near it. There, the head of the temple, Yugal Kishore Das Prabhu, published this. In fact, I have it right here. The Art and Science of Self-Mastery. This is an amazing set of books. I don't know if you can see me holding it. Um, Three little volumes. One is time management, one is anger management, one is stress management. Very needed, right? And time management, I think, is very key in making sure that you have enough time to really do your sadhana. We can chant on the beads and chant on the beads, and then literally take our bead bag, we hang it up on a hook somewhere, and then we go about our day and we just put it there. But how often are we remembering the holy name throughout the day? Amachi, my first guru, said that someone said, "Oh, I will take your blessing, Amachi, but I will get a hug from you, Amachi, but I will not take mantra because I do not have time to chant." And she says, "Do you ever get up late at night and go to the bathroom and then come back to bed?" And he said, "Of course I do sometimes, because then you have time to chant." On one level, any level of chanting the holy name is good. But to fully realize the implications of this mantra where we chant Hare Krishna, I surrender myself to Krishna. Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama is the mantra of the Pushti Marg tradition. Krishna, I surrender to you. Jesus, I trust in you. The um, mantra from I believe it's the Divine Mercy chaplets. It's like a Catholic, um, Saint Faustina, I think, used this phrase. If we knew the applications of that, the implications of that statement, I would think we would be more inclined to follow it. But we can't, kind of chant ourselves chant ourselves out of our material attachments. We're making these mistakes all the time, this inattentiveness. That's one of the great things about mental chanting is it forces you to think of the mantra, think of the sound of the mantra, and not just, you can be chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare loud and just be having it on autopilot. Although for Maha Mantra in particular, it is particularly auspicious to chant aloud. You are supposed to hear the mantra as well as saying it. So these are the 10 offenses. And how do we get rid of them? What what is the remedy for this to be done? If we are stuck in this place of we're chanting these names, but we are not getting the full benefits of the holy name, what are we to do? But the cure is to chant more. Like, spoiler alert. I alluded earlier that we shouldn't take this attitude of, oh, I am so unholy, I cannot chant these names. Sanat Kumar says to Narada, "O Narada, Shiva, with grace told the sages and me the great name of the Lord, bringing happiness. It should always be carefully preserved. They who, even knowing the importance of the name, do not suddenly avoid that sins against the name, are like children, who being angry afflict their mother. Being free from sins, always mutter the name of Vishnu, O divine sage. Due to the name, you will accomplish everything, and not by any other means." Narada says, "O Sanat Kumar, how is it that those who like rash acts, who bereft of all discrimination," this translation is weird, who bereft of all discrimination and detachment, who are intent upon themselves as they love their own bodies, arise from amongst us? It's a bit weird. So what is to be done for those who are very materially attached? Sanat Kumar says, when somehow a sin or blemish takes place against the name, the man should always recite the name and seek its refuge only. Names alone remove the sin of those having, i.e., who have committed the sin against the names of Vishnu, since they alone, employed without rest or continuously, bring wealth. It is the name alone which, being the characteristic mark when remembered or heard, either in a pure form or with incorrect syllables, would protect a man when it is recited without interruption. This alone is the truth. It is if it is resorted to hypocritically or for greed born of love for the body or wealth, it will not quickly produce the fruit here. O Narada, this great secret, which removes all inauspiciousness and keeps off sins, was formerly heard by me from Shiva. O Narada, even those who are intent on committing sins, but who know the names of Vishnu, would be liberated merely by reciting them. This seems very contradictory. Didn't we just say that you cannot get the full benefit of the holy name if you are intent on committing evil acts? This is a puzzler, and we can debate whether this is or not this is contradictory. But I take it to mean that those who are duplicitous in chanting, they are also liberated. Hiranyakashipu was always thinking of Vishnu, always had his mind, when is that Vishnu going to come and try to kill me? Kamsa was always thinking of Krishna, but he wasn't chanting to Krishna sincerely. And they got liberated. Both of them got liberated. But they were liberated through the Lord having to come kill them. To have liberation is no small thing. To have pure love of God is quite another thing entirely. You get liberate there. It's said that in the Gaudiya scriptures, one who recites these two syllables, Krishna, is freed from more sins than he could ever possibly commit. But still, we have to chant Hare Krishna, to soften our own hearts. To be scooped up and saved is not that big a deal. But to get rid of the tendencies that you have towards attachment that keep you in this cycle of suffering, that is the real work that has to be done. God is very eager to wipe us clean. It's just he is inviting us to come and dwell in that purity, dwell in that love, dwell in that pure, unconditional acceptance. With all of our flaws, with all of our attachments, with all of our stuff, we are invited to give ourselves wholly to the holy name. So I will end there for today. Folks, I don't think I'll get to Hanuman today. There's a lot I want to say about Shiva and Hanuman. I think I'm going to leave that for next week because I have something prepared, but I kind of want to make it longer. like, and we'll all be kind of coming down off the vibe of Shivaratri, which is going to be awesome. It is one of the most ecstatic, buzzing days of the year. I'm already buzzing with energy. Much love to all of you. Panchakalpatrubhyascha kripasindhibhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I will post this soon, and next week we will go further into Bhagavatam, into Uddhava's descriptions of the narration of the life of Lord Krishna, and then the week after that, I believe, is Gora Purnima. And so no, the week after that is Ramakrishna's appearance day. So I believe either next week or the week after that, we are going to do story time from the boyhood of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, which includes a really cool story about Shivaratri itself as well. So I know we have, and of course for those interested, I have a full class on Lord Shiva and Vaishnavism available for you to watch on the YouTube. I'll send it to the chat again. But even so, we should be having some sprinklings of Lord Shiva content in this very Shiva-centric season. All right. Much love to all of you.